and welcome to this brand new episode of my podcast, A Friend in Your Ear. This is the first episode of the year because today is the 1st of January 2023 as I record this. I hope you had an amazing evening last night and that you are looking forward to the year ahead. I'm also filming this episode of the podcast and you can watch it on my YouTube channel, which has the same name as the podcast, which is A Friend in Your Ear. So if you'd like to watch the video version, do head over to YouTube and take a look there. So in this podcast episode, I'm going to talk to you about our recent trip to Iceland. We went the day after Boxing Day because it's my son's girlfriend's birthday on Boxing Day. So we have to be here for Boxing Day and we like to be back by New Year's Eve, which gives us those few days in that period to go away. And it's something that we've done for the last few years, other than last year where we were due to go to Cornwall, but my youngest daughter tested COVID positive on Christmas Day. So that put an end to that one. But in years before that, we've gone to the Canary Islands a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times. And it's fabulous to get away for some sun and for some warmth just for those few days. But this year we decided to do something completely different and we headed up to Iceland. So in this podcast episode, and in no particular order, I'm going to talk to you about journey times, the food, the things to do, the places to stay, what to take, interesting facts, just in case it is something or somewhere that is on your radar and you'd like to know a little bit more, or maybe it's not somewhere you've contemplated before and this podcast might give you enough information to think, yeah, love the sound of that, or no, thank you very much, that is not for me. So anyway, just to set the scene a little bit, there's 5 of us in our family, myself and my husband, 3 children. Flo's 23, Freddie's 21, Matilda is 14, nearly 15, as she keeps telling me. So we've got a 9-year age gap between the children. And it's not a problem, but it can be sometimes a little bit more challenging to find something that everybody wants to do. So Iceland seemed to tick all of those boxes before we set out, which is why we booked it. But before we set out on the journey, we had a little interesting scenario unfold, which basically went like this. So 3 days before we were due to go, I looked at the suitcases. Because we couldn't fly from Birmingham, we were driving up to Manchester. And although we could book 5 bags onto the aeroplane, realistically we had to think about what we could get in the back of the car. And although we have a car big enough for 5 of us and the boot is fine, it isn't huge. So we booked 3 bags on. We booked 3 suitcases on between the 5 of us, which we knew would be fine. And a few days before we went, when we were looking at the suitcases, I said to my husband, there is no way we're going to get those 3 suitcases in the back of my car. And I know these things. My spatial awareness is okay. And I've done a lot of taking the kids to and from university and packing the car and knowing what we can get in my car and what we can't. And he was like, no, it'll be absolutely fine. And promptly booked a 4th suitcase on. Anyway, so we come to go on our holiday, 11:30 with our assembled, start packing the car. And I hear these groans and moans. It's like, they're not going to go in. They're not going to go in. So I went out to the car and tried to assist, which I did, made some progress, but they still weren't all going to go in. So we had this mad dash scramble to take a suitcase into the house, unpack it, cast some things aside, repack it, get it into the car, none of which was a foregone conclusion. So we started off, true Gudrun style, by leaving 15 minutes late. That has happened before when my husband, bless him, ordered a taxi for all 5 of us, but you could only get 4 people in it. So these are the kind of things we come up against, but I always know it's going to work out fine. We leave enough time, we're organised enough so that everything is going to be okay. And it was, other than when we reached the motorway and there was a massive, massive traffic jam, so we couldn't actually get on the motorway. So we had to wend our way up from Birmingham, up the M6 to Manchester, whilst not going on the M6 for quite a long time. And there was one point where I thought, this is going to be a little bit closer than I would like it to be. And it would only take one more thing to happen and we would not be getting on that flight to Reykjavik. But actually, we made it in time. We got on the plane. We had our little family scenario dynamic play out before we even left the house, just to set us off on the right foot. I always love one of those. They're what make life interesting. So anyway, in terms of the flight, just in case you want to know how to get to Reykjavik, we couldn't fly direct from Birmingham, so we had to go up to Manchester. The flight time is 2 hours 30 minutes, so perfectly doable in a window of 4 days or so. From London, I think it's about 2 hours 50. So again, perfectly doable. We loved the flight. It was great. It was very smooth. We took off. It was an evening flight out there. So it was about a 5 o'clock flight out there, but coming back, it was a daytime flight. And so the views as you came down over the north of Scotland, over the mountains, the snow, the islands, was absolutely beautiful. It was clear, it was sunny. So in terms of travel time, that's probably quite helpful to know, because sometimes that can be a deal breaker for people if it just feels like it's going to be too long. In terms of places to stay, what I will say is that Iceland as a country is very expensive, which you might imagine. Everything has to be imported. It's a long way from places, and it's just one of those things that you have to accept before you go. But there are ways to deal with that, so I will come to those, particularly when it comes to food. But when we booked our holiday, I think we had a choice of 2 or 3 hotels. We wanted somewhere very central, and the hotel that we stayed at, which was called Hotel Centrum, you also got breakfast included. And when there's 5 of you, to eat out for breakfast, well, every meal every day soon mounts up. So the fact that breakfast was included was a real bonus for us, and I think that's what sealed the deal. I think it came down to a choice of, like I say, a few hotels. This one was a little bit cheaper, Hotel Centrum, and we got breakfast included. The hotel was lovely. It was so pretty. The houses and the buildings in Iceland and in Reykjavik are made of corrugated iron. Not sure what's underneath them, concrete, I think. They all have to be built to withstand an earthquake which measures 6 on the Richter scale. So they're really strong buildings and they're really pretty. And our hotel was 2 separate Icelandic buildings which were kind of joined together by a central atrium. And it was lovely, it was light, it was open, it was airy. There was a bar with a wood-burning stove in there. They didn't serve food in the hotel other than breakfast. There were probably some snacks. The rooms were great. We had 3 double rooms. So my son and our youngest ended up sharing. My eldest daughter had a room to herself, and then my husband and I shared. The rooms weren't next to one another, but that was fine. They all had a bathroom, lots of storage space, kettle, tiny teacups. Not sure what that was all about. I like a good sized mug for my cup of peppermint tea. TV, which I don't think we switched on. You know, we were on the go the whole time when we were away, so there wasn't much downtime, but the rooms were great. We took a yoga mat. I did my yoga whilst I was there. Not every day, but there was enough space to do that. Plenty of hot water and plenty of heating, so we were never cold when we were inside the hotel. Outside of the hotel was a different matter. I shall come to that in a minute. But there are other hotel options, obviously. We spoke to some people when we were on a boat trip. They had done an Airbnb, which had meant that they'd had to hire a car from the airport. I guess you could get a taxi. And the road conditions were really difficult when we arrived. They'd had lots of snow, which isn't typical for this time of year, or at all necessarily in Reykjavik. So I think that was a little bit challenging. And then there's more of the sort of corporate style of hotels. So there's a Radisson Blu. There were some other hotels that I recognised as well, but ours was quite small and very Icelandic, which was lovely, and a central location near to a little ice rink, near to a lake, near to lovely restaurants. So really good location. So that's generally how it worked for us in terms of the accommodation. That was a tick. That worked out great. Let's talk a little bit about what to take, because I did have some people on Instagram say, can you do a packing video? So in the podcast, obviously, because some of you will be listening to this rather than watching it, I can't show you clothes, show you outfits, but I will talk through what to take and some of the things I forgot to take and should have taken. But luckily my eldest daughter is superly organised, so she had those things with her. Now the temperature at its coldest was minus 18 degrees, and that is I have been to Niagara Falls before, and that was -25. -18 is not far off, and it is so cold that you can't even take your gloves off for more than 30 seconds to take a photograph or to record a story or anything like that, because your hands get so cold. My son had like little sort of snowy frosty particles on the end of his eyelashes and in his eyebrows. It was unbelievably cold, but brilliant, beautiful weather, sunlight from the minute that the sun came up, which, let me tell you, it took a while for it to appear. So it would come up at about 11:30 and would set at 4ish, 5ish. But those hours of sunlight or daylight, for us at least, because it was so clear, were beautiful. And the sunrise was lovely, the sunset was lovely, but it was challenging going outside at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, and it being dark. It really messes with your body clock. All you want to do is hibernate. So that was a bit of a challenge. But anyway, coming back to what we needed with us, given how cold it was, and this was very rare for them, because normally at this time of year it is -2 degrees and it was -18 degrees. So things that were invaluable to take were thermals. There was a day where I had 2 pairs of thermals on underneath my jeans. Now, I think all 3 of my children and my husband took their salopettes with them. I didn't. I don't like wearing them, but I knew I'd be fine with 2 pairs of thermals, pair of jeans, and then I had a full length long puffer jacket or coat. So that was okay, but do take thermals, thick socks. So I wore 2 pairs of one pair of normal socks, in speech marks for the word normal, and 1 pair of really thick boot socks. And they were incredible together. I had the toastiest toes out of all of us, I think. So I just bought myself some M&S boot socks before Christmas for this very reason, and they were great. The other thing, I thought I'd written down here, but handy to have your butt with you. It actually says buff. So you know the skiing buffs, almost like the balaclavas, but that you can pull up over your face. So I borrowed my daughter's the second night we went out on the boat to see the Northern Lights, which I'll come to in a minute. But it's basically like a big tube, and you can pull it up over the back of your head and put your hat on top. So essentially all of your face is covered other than your eyes. That made such a difference when, I think on one day I wore 2 hats actually, but making sure your head and as much of your face as possible are covered is, well, that was life-changing. That made such a difference when I'd got that on. So wearing a butt or a buff, whatever you want to call it, great. Take one of those with you. Gloves. So I think all my children had skiing gloves with them. I had mittens. I definitely prefer mittens than gloves. I've learned from bitter experience when I've been out on long, cold runs that actually wearing mittens is much better, because you can screw your hands up inside of the mittens and your own body warmth will warm your other fingers. So I would sometimes be out and I'd be swapping gloves with one of the girls. We'd have one of their skiing gloves and one of my mittens, and we'd keep moving around. But some really good gloves. My son bought some glove liners when we were out there for under his ski gloves. So if you want ski gloves with liners, or wear mittens, or wear lightweight gloves with mittens over the top, but make sure your hands are really going to be warm. Then scarves, super important, similar to wearing the buff really, but just an extra layer of warmth. You just want to cover all those tiny cracks where the wind or the cold could get in, and make sure that you're completely secured, a bit like, I don't know, wrapping something up in a load of tin foil. You don't want there to be any gaps where any cold can get in. Sunglasses, good thing to take, because the sun is really strong when it does come up. So sunglasses can be good. Obviously your coats are going to be key. For me, like I said, I had a very long down coat, which I found super warm. The rest of the family had skiing coats. I don't actually think they're as warm as good old feathers, but just think about that, what you've got already, what you could possibly layer up. I'd also got I didn't take it with me, but I wish I had. I got a down gilet as well, which would have been great to layer underneath my coat. I probably could have got another layer underneath. Decent boots are an absolute must. They were a complete lifesaver for me. I'd got some sorrel boots, which I'd bought to go skiing a few years ago, and I knew in my heart of hearts this is a big faux pas on my part, that they were a little bit small. And I did a long walk with my sister last year. It was a 13-mile walk, and I ended up with 2 black toenails because of it. And I thought, and it was so painful. I just thought, Beth, you cannot keep wearing, as much as you love them, you cannot keep wearing these boots. So I've given those to my daughter, who's got smaller feet than me, and I ordered myself some new Hoka walking boots before Christmas. And the grip on them was brilliant. I only fell over once. And the grip is brilliant, and they were warm, and they were cozy, they were toasty. And had I not had those, I think I would have really struggled, because I am not great at walking on ice, and there was so much ice and compacted snow on the pavements that I would have really, really struggled. So make sure you've got some great walking boots with you. And I think that applies whatever time of year you go, because if you're going to be there, you're going to be outside, it's probably likely to be chilly at some point, or you're going to be walking long distances. So even if I hadn't have taken any other shoes with me, just taking the walking boots would have been the best thing that I could have done. And then face cream, your face gets dry, it gets sore. Hand cream and lip salve, they were 3 things. I didn't have lip salve with me, and I didn't have hand cream with me, but I pinched those for my daughter, and I did have face cream with me. So they're all the really practical things. And then aside from that, I found taking a long jumper dress was great, because it gave me more layers over my jeans. I found having lots of lighter thermal layers or long sleeve tops, and some chunky knits as well. So for me, it was all about layering, keeping warm, and then having a couple of really heavy jumpers as well. Lots of faux fur going on there, lots of scarves, lots of hats, lots of mittens, lots of things, just like I say, to keep you warm. Now, in terms of things to do, there is so much out there to do. We had a real whistle-stop whirlwind tour. It would have been lovely if we'd have had another couple of days. I think that would have been ideal, so that we could layer the trips with a bit more downtime and rest time in between. I think there was, by the time the sun comes up, and just in terms of thinking of what you might like to do to relax. So if you like to read a book, or if you want to do some writing, or whatever it may be, there's not that much time of day where it's good light and you've probably got Wi-Fi and the things that you might like to have to set yourself up to do all these other things that you can do when you're relaxing. So just think about that. But we just had this small window of opportunity. We quite wanted to do things back to back and to be busy, and that's great. And would I change it? On reflection, if I was going again, I would maybe see if we could build in another day for some more downtime and to explore Reykjavik a little bit more. But as it was brilliant. It was just amazing. So things to do. Now, I'd always really wanted to go and see the Northern Lights, and that was something that we ended up doing twice. So the first time we went out on the boat to see the Northern Lights, there was just a faint little glow, and it wasn't great. But then we were given another ticket, so they'll let you go out. I don't know how many times they'll let you go out and do it, but we booked with a tour company called Elding, Elding. They were great. We did both whale watching and Northern Lights with Elding. And they have a big boat. The first night that we went out, it was very busy. They do offer you a seasickness tablet. So if that's something that concerns you, you can take advantage of those. There's not a lot on board. There's a few refreshments, but there's not a lot. It's quite brutal. You're out for 2.5 to 3 hours. Obviously, depending on the weather, that's what makes it brutal or not. It was quite windy the first night. It wasn't choppy. There was a little bit of swell. It was very cold. They do offer you these incredible all-in-one suits, which I took advantage of every time I went on the boat. But having a very long full-length puffer did mean that I had this interesting layer around my middle where I had to shove my coat in and pull the suit up. They've got a big hood, zip up the front, windproof, everything proof. So I would say if you're going to go out on one of those boats at night time, take advantage of wearing one of those suits. So the first time we did the Northern Lights, like I said, there wasn't much to see. There was a tiny little bit of a glow, but we went back again on the last night and they were brilliant. Now there's a real difference between what you can see through the naked eye and what you can see through a camera. The camera on my phone wasn't good enough to pick all the lights up. But I was looking through other people's phones and looking through my son's phone. They've got another function on their camera, and I don't know what it is exactly, but it meant that you could see the Northern Lights in their full spectacular display, and they were incredible. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. So if you do go to Iceland and the Northern Lights are something you want to do, it's good to book that early in the trip. That's why it was done that way for us. That was great advice. So if we didn't see them the first time, we did have an opportunity to go back before we left to see them again. And if you do get a chance to do that, I thoroughly recommend it. I thought they were spectacular, and you can almost see them sort of moving and falling and dropping out of the sky, and they create all these beautiful patterns and really bright lights. They're just like nothing I've ever seen before. So that's something that is definitely worth doing. Whale watching was another trip that we did, again with the same company, on the same boat. That was a daytime trip. That lasted longer. So that was probably 3.5, maybe to 4 hours. I think if the whales come out and play earlier, then the trip isn't as long. The whales weren't really up for coming and showing themselves to us. We saw a couple of sprays out of blowholes, and I think one of the whales did arc out of the water. Other family members reported seeing a flash of grey. That was all we saw for the whale watching trip. I wouldn't say it was disappointing. I think you have to go out just knowing that if you see the whales or the Northern Lights, it's an absolute bonus and exactly what you would hope for. But even if you don't, it's just a beautiful experience to be out on a boat. The night was clear when we went out. You could see the stars. When we were out whale watching, you can see the mountains, you can see the ice in the sea. There's still lots to do. It's still a beautiful experience, but just know that it's not a guaranteed experience. And that's what I love about nature. So many things these days are so formulaic and so predictable, and you know what the result's going to be. And with nature, it doesn't happen like that. You just have to go with the flow, and if it happens, it does, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and so be it. So they were the two things, Northern Lights and whale watching, that we did on the sea. Another activity, there's lots of activities involving water, was going to the Blue Lagoon, which was a brilliant experience. If you haven't seen any of this, you can go to my Instagram account, which is bethgoodrum.stylist, and you can see the pictures of us in the Blue Lagoon. So the Blue Lagoon is heated, it's geothermal, it's heated to 38 degrees, which is a fabulous temperature. It's probably the temperature that you would have your shower at. And we were there in the water for 2 hours, weren't cold at all. That was one thing that we did that we upgraded to, so that we didn't have to queue to go in. We got a robe, which I just thought, yes, please, because it's going to be freezing outside. And you get into the pool, and then we had 3 face masks. So you swim up to this little sort of hut in the water, and you get your face mask. You leave the first one on for 10 minutes, and then the second one for 5 minutes, and the third one for 10 minutes, I think. Rinse them off under fresh water, which is freezing, and apply the next one. There was also another place we could swim up to, and we had a drink included. It could be a beer, a glass of sparkling wine, or a smoothie, something like that. And around the edge of the pools, or the large pool, which had little bridges over and little subsections you could sort of swim around, there were some saunas and steam rooms you could go in as well. So that was a fantastic experience, because it was a bright sunny day. You've got the mountains in the background, you've got the snow over the top of them, the steam is coming off the pool, and again, it's just I can't quite believe I'm here. It's almost like you're in a parallel universe. Children, I think I'm right in saying from the age of 2 can go in there. So don't be put off if your children are young. It is cold, but only momentarily when you've taken your robe off and you're walking towards the water. I would say that the boat trips looked more challenging with younger children, because the Northern Lights trip is late, they were tired, they were cold. So I'm not sure that lends itself quite as well. Not that having young children should put you off from doing anything, but if you want an easier life, I'm not sure they're the easiest trips to do, but maybe one to the Blue Lagoon if your children didn't find it too warm, which I don't think they would. Other things that we did was, so on the last day we did a tour of the Golden Circle, and that has 3 stops on it. So we were collected, I can't remember the exact time, I think it was 7:30 in the morning. It was very dark, but it was very dark a lot over there. And we got back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a really good tour guide. She talked us through lots of interesting facts about Iceland. I'll come to just a few of those in a minute. But we had a great tour guide on a bus. There was quite a lot of waiting and being dropped off at different bus places to collect buses and things, which was fine. But again, just be aware of that, build it into your day. Make sure everyone's expectations are managed about how you might have to be standing outside for 10 minutes or snow in the freezing cold. So always wrap up warm, always have snacks, always be prepared for these little eventualities. And the first place that we went to is where the two tectonic plates meet. So it's the Euro-Asia plate and the North America plate. And we stood, you can do a little walk around on a bridge, which takes you from one plate to the other. And there's a gorge that you can walk through. And on one side, it's the Euro-Asia plate. And on the other side, it's the North America plate. And this gorge keeps getting a little bit wider every year as these two plates are moving apart. So we were there as the sun was starting to come up. And that was beautiful. It was cold, very cold, but it was beautiful. And there was a snack shop. There was somewhere to get some food. There was a few different exhibitions explaining what was going on. So everything is clean, nice loos, well organised, well presented. The population is only 348,000 or something in the whole of the country. And the fourth largest city has a population, or largest town has a population of 12,000. So it's a big country with not that many people in it, which seems to make it feel open and fresh, and all the facilities are clean and well looked after, and it's not overcrowded. So at each of these stations that I'm going to tell you about, there were always facilities, because we weren't sure when we started, like, should we take a packed lunch? We're going to be able to get food? What's the loo situation going to be? But no, it is a well-oiled machine, and there were facilities there for everybody. So the first place that we went to were these two tectonic plates. The second place that we went to was to see the, as they call them, geysers, but geysers, 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 I don't think it matters. Again, off the bus, little bit of a journey, lots of facilities there, nice gift shops, outside. Oh boy, that was cold. And there's this one geyser that goes every 4 to 8 minutes. And again, there's a little video of that on Instagram that you can see. It just explodes high into the air, and there's lots of other bubbling ones around, lots of steam, smells of sulfur. Again, like you're in a parallel universe, just absolutely beautiful, incredible to watch. I've seen pictures of it in the summer as well. We were obviously there in the winter, so there were the mountains around covered in snow. Very atmospheric, very Christmassy, beautiful experience. And then the third place that we went to after that were to the waterfalls, incredible waterfalls, which were frozen. And I think that was probably the coldest place. The viewing platforms were open, but the paths that took you closer to the waterfalls weren't, because they were just so treacherously slippery. And you just couldn't quite believe what you were seeing in terms of the waterfalls, but where they were frozen. So the water was just coming over the edge of the waterfalls, and it was all frozen solid, apart from a tiny bit, which was obviously, I would guess, the part of the waterfall that had the most movement and the most rapid water flow. It was too quick for it to freeze. But that, again, if you love nature and beautiful views and are just so excited by seeing these things, that was incredible to do. In addition to that, going around Reykjavik is great. It's a lovely city. They've got this beautiful church. You can go up to the viewing platform and look out over there, take fabulous pictures. That was a great experience. Just having a little pootle around, that was what we ended up doing. They've got lots of museums. We didn't really get to visit any of the museums, but I can tell you there's a penis museum. Not sure why anyone would want a penis museum in particular. Like I say, didn't go in it, did walk past it. I'll say no more about that. Anyway, that was good fun. So in terms of things to do, there's also there's a ski resort there, so you could potentially go skiing, and you can go and do the skidoos, snow, I don't know what they're called, those like motorbike things that you sit on and whiz around all the glaciers on those. That looked really good fun as well. Now, let me just talk to you briefly about the food, and then I'll do a few interesting facts. So the food, it is expensive. So we are talking £12 for a sandwich. at least. And so if there's 5 of you and it's £12 for a sandwich, and then you add on, I don't know, some crisps or some fruit and a drink, you know, £100 for lunch, easily. But we did find a way around that. So one of the reasons that we'd chosen to have breakfast included in our hotel package was so that we could maybe navigate around this a little bit. And the 5 of us have quite different eating habits in a way. And I'll run you through them very quickly because you might identify with these. So Mr. G can have a large breakfast and can go to his evening meal without needing much in between. So if he had a decent breakfast, his box was ticked, he was fine. I'm not like that. I need to eat every few hours or I fall over. So what I did was so I'd have yogurt for breakfast with berries on top, lots of nuts and seeds. And then I would make myself a sandwich, which I would have partway through the day because there was loads of nice bread, there was sourdough bread, all sorts of bread. I'd just make a cheese and ham sandwich to keep me going. It's not what I would necessarily choose to eat for my lunch, but it made sense. So I would have a cheese and ham sandwich. My son likes a big breakfast and likes to eat regularly. So even if he'd had a big breakfast, he couldn't go to the end of the day. And for some reason, neither he nor I got round to making a sandwich for him. So he would have something out, but we were only there for 2 or 3 days. So we just accept it's like, Freddie needs a proper sandwich at lunchtime. He's the biggest out of all of us. Yeah, you can have that. That's fine. Flo is gluten intolerant, so she would pack up a snack box. So she arrived with all these snack boxes from Paper Chase. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They stack inside one another. So she would line them up and have nuts in one and seeds in another. And then she brought a few snacks from home, gluten-free snacks, and we bought some hummus whilst we were out there. So she would do that for her lunch. And then Matilda, the youngest, she would vary. So sometimes she would have a snack that she'd brought from home, or she would have a sandwich that I made her. So we managed to muddle through that little scenario. And it was only really the evening meals that we were paying for and having out. The rest of the day, we seemed to manage okay with just boxing and coxing and knowing how we all worked and dealing with it that way. So the food is really expensive. There's lots of ice cream out there, which you wouldn't think was an obvious thing, but that was great. So there was nice gelato ice cream. Lots of really interesting restaurants. So there was Nepalese restaurant, there were burger places, there were pizza places, there was tapas, lots of Vietnamese food, cinnamon buns. There were some nice bakeries, so we had cinnamon buns. Fish and chips is a big thing. Obviously, you know, their waters are filled with beautiful fish. We had, I think, 1 burger meal out. We had a street food, Icelandic street food, but inside, which was soup. They're big on their soups, meat soup, fish soup, lobster soup. So we tried to eat in little local places where we could that weren't super expensive. And then we had one really nice meal out down by the harbour, which was more of the full-on restaurant experience. So again, we boxed and coxed a little bit and made it up as we went along, as we tend to. I found that there, as you would imagine, there wasn't a lot of readily available fruit and vegetable all the time. So sometimes breakfast would be the best time to eat a lot of fruit. They've got oranges, they've got melon, they've got berries, and they also had cucumber and tomato out. They do have greenhouses there and they do grow flowers, cucumbers, tomatoes and some other fruit and veg, but there's not vast quantities, I would say, but I only had a snapshot and probably didn't have a chance to really dig down into all of that. But breakfast was the time to really get my 5 a day in, so that might be worth knowing. And I did have their yogurt. I can't remember how they pronounce it now. You do see it on the television. So is it skew, something like that. And that was great. Really enjoyed that with granola and berries and nuts and seeds on the top. So a couple of interesting facts before we close. They, like I say, the population is incredibly small, 300 and something thousand. And the 4th biggest town has 12,000 people in it. No house there is older than 30 years old, which is really surprising. I think all the traditional farmhouses were knocked down and rebuilt. They look as if they're older than that. They're pretty little houses and very strong because of the earthquake and volcanic situation over there. They call it the land of fire and ice, and you can see why. We drove through one town and there was no cemetery in that town because that cemetery had hot springs that kept popping up. And the tour guide said, we just can't bury bodies here because you just don't know if they're going to pop up in a hot spring, which I thought was a vaguely interestingly amusing fact. So those people that die have to go to Reykjavik to be buried. All their water and heating is all heated from these hot springs, and you can be driving along the road and just see plumes of steam coming out of the ground. So that's why there's so much hot water and always plenty of heating. And at Christmas, they have the 12 Elves of Christmas, which my children have decided they would like to adopt in our house. And from the 12th of December, I think it is, every day the children are left a present by a different elf, which comes down from the mountain, and the presents get progressively bigger in the run up to Christmas. So the time they reach Christmas Eve, which is when they open all their presents, that's when they get their largest presents. And my children, they were all asleep, I think. I heard this and relayed it to them, and they decided that we definitely should have the 12 Elves of Christmas in our house as well. One other thing that they've got, which is worth mentioning, is this a light that goes up into the sky. It's a blue light, and I think it goes something like, this sounds crazy, but I think it's 8 kilometers into the sky. And Yoko Ono put it there for John Lennon, and there were 3 reasons. Of course, I'm not going to be able to remember them all now, but there were 3 reasons why she chose Iceland. One was because it was environmentally friendly to run this huge light because it was all geothermal. So that was fine. I don't think it shines every day of the year, but it always shines between Christmas and New Year. So she was impressed from an ecological perspective that it wasn't going to cause harm to the environment to light the light. Another reason was because Iceland is known as a very peaceful country. So that really appealed to her. And then I think the third reason was because of where Iceland is situated between the UK and America and being on the tectonic plates. That really appealed to her as well, which I thought was a nice story actually, because when we were told about this light that was there for John Lennon, I was trying to figure out why the light would be in Iceland as opposed to Liverpool or somewhere in England or somewhere in America. Anyway, so that's the reason for that. A few little interesting facts around there. So in general, when it comes to Iceland, I think it was one of the best trips we have done. It was full on. It was dark until it got light, funny that, which was about midday, and there wasn't a lot of light, but the experience is just so out of this world. They're so different. Well, they were for us. They were so different to anything we'd ever done before in terms of seeing the hot springs, having the opportunity to see the whales, seeing the northern lights, seeing the frozen waterfalls, seeing the geysers. You know, in such a short space of time, you do so many different things. The scenery is stunning, it's beautiful, there's volcanoes and obviously mountains, waterfalls, hot springs, lovely houses to look at, which really appealed to me in all different pretty colours, incredible views, beautiful sunrises, sunsets, snow, ski resorts. There's just so many different things there, which means in a very short space of time, you can have a really intense experience. It's almost like we've been there, we've come back, and I can't believe that we ever went. It was so magical, and there's so much on offer for all different ages. I think it's unlikely for it to be as cold again. January is their coldest month, but if you were thinking of going next winter, you probably wouldn't, says she, fingers crossed, encounter such cold temperatures. It's not that much colder than here ordinarily. We just happened to hit a particularly cold spell, and as we were coming out of Reykjavik and due to leave, we weren't sure if we would get home because there were severe weather warnings of blizzards and there was a risk the airport could have been closed, which would have been fine. We'd have worked with it, says she, hopefully. But anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this roundup of the trip to Iceland that we've just been on. I think you can probably tell from what I've said, we thought it was amazing. And if you've got any questions, come find me on Instagram. I'm at bethgoodrum.stylist. If you're watching this on YouTube, just leave a comment below. I will check in and see if there are any comments that you want me to respond to. And in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful 2023. Who can believe that we're already in 2023? I've got some great podcast episodes lined up for you, which I'm really looking forward to recording. I'll probably crack on with one of them now. And in the meantime, I shall send you lots of love, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. You take care, have a great day, and bye for now.